Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dr. Creepy. In tonight's episode, we're heading straight into 9 most disturbing, true winter horror stories. Unsettling accounts that unfolded during snowstorms, blackouts, and long frozen nights where help was nowhere nearby and the cold wasn't the only thing watching. From isolated houses buried under snow, to footsteps circling cabins after midnight, to late-night encounters on empty winter roads and woods that went unnaturally silent. These stories took place when darkness lasted longer, silence felt heavier, and survival depended on staying alert. If you're new here, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new true horror stories. Now get comfortable, and let's start. I still don't know why I remember the exact time it started. 2:17 a.m. I was awake because the wind had been slamming snow against my bedroom window like handfuls of gravel. That kind of sound pulls you out of sleep even when you're exhausted. I rolled over, checked my phone, and almost put it down again, until I heard the engine. A low diesel rumble crawled through the storm, slow and deliberate, close enough to vibrate the floorboards. A snowplow. That didn't make sense. The county had shut down all non-emergency services hours earlier. The storm was supposed to peak overnight, and no one plowed our road until morning at the earliest. We lived at the far end of a rural subdivision, 5 houses spread along a dead-end road that disappeared into state forest. When conditions got bad, we were always last. I pushed the curtain aside and looked out. Through the white blur, headlights cut a narrow tunnel down the road. A plow blade threw snow to the side in heavy arcs, piling it against already massive drifts. The truck moved slowly, almost cautiously, like it was feeling its way forward. Relief washed over me. If they were plowing now, maybe the roads would be passable by morning. Maybe I wouldn't be snowed in for days. The truck passed my house and continued toward the dead end. Its taillights faded into the storm. I went back to bed. 40 minutes later, I heard it again. Same engine. Same slow pace, same scrape of metal against frozen asphalt. I checked the clock, 2:58 a.m. I got up and looked out the window again. The plow came from the same direction as before, pushing snow that had already been pushed once. The piles along the road were higher now, unnaturally clean, like someone had carefully reshaped them instead of letting the storm do its work. The truck passed my driveway again. I leaned closer to the glass, trying to see the county logo on the door, but the snow was too thick. I did notice something odd, though. The cab light was off. Every plow I'd ever seen had its interior lit up at night. You could always see the silhouette of the driver, one hand on the wheel, the other resting somewhere near the controls. This time, the cab was just a dark shape behind the windshield. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the light was broken. Maybe the angle was wrong. The plow reached the end of the road, turned around somewhere beyond the trees, and vanished again. I didn't sleep after that. At 3:41 a.m., it came back. This time, I watched it from the front window, standing in the cold darkness of my living room. I didn't turn on any lights. Something about the truck made me want to stay unseen. As it rolled past, I noticed the blade wasn't throwing snow anymore. It was lowered, scraping the road, but there wasn't enough accumulation left to justify another pass. The storm was still raging, but the surface beneath the blade looked almost bare, black ice glistening under the headlights. The plow slowed in front of my house. Not stopped, just slowed. The headlights angled slightly toward my driveway, illuminating the snow-buried mailbox, the outline of my car, the front door. I held my breath. For a second, I thought the driver might be looking at the house. I don't know why. I couldn't see anyone inside the cab, but the feeling was there anyway, like pressure behind my eyes, like being stared at without actually seeing the face doing it. Then the truck continued on. I told myself I was overthinking it. Lack of sleep, storm nerves, isolation does strange things to your head. At 4:23 a.m., the plow came again, and again at 5:04. By the 6th pass, dawn was trying and failing to break through the clouds. The sky had that dull blue-gray color that meant the storm wasn't done with us yet. I sat on the couch, coat on, boots laced, just watching. The truck never changed speed, never turned on its interior light, never lifted the blade. It just passed, turned around, passed again. I called the county road department once the office line opened. It rang until it went to voicemail. I left a message explaining that a plow had been running our road all night and asking if it was scheduled. No one called back. By mid-morning, the storm eased, the wind died down, and the snow fell straight instead of sideways. I ventured outside to check the damage. The road looked wrong. It was too clean. Not plowed clean, scraped clean. The surface was polished down to ice, and the snowbanks lining the road were tall and smooth, like walls. The usual messy piles, the chunks and ridges left by hurried county work, were gone. I walked to the end of the driveway and examined the tracks. There was no salt, no gravel, just blade marks, long and straight, pressed deep into the frozen asphalt. I knocked on my nearest neighbor's door. No answer. I knew they were home. Their truck was half buried in the yard. I tried the next house. Same thing. By noon, the plow returned. Broad daylight, clear enough to see details. The truck was old, older than anything the county still used. The paint was a faded orange, nearly brown in places, and the logo on the door was so worn it might never have been there at all. Rust streaked the seams, and the blade was scarred and bent, like it had hit things harder than snow. It slowed in front of me. I stood at the edge of my driveway, heart pounding, my breath fogging the air. I raised a hand, a hesitant wave, trying to flag the driver down. The truck did not react. It rolled past me, close enough that I could hear the engine ticking unevenly, like it was struggling to keep a steady rhythm. I looked into the cab as it passed. There was no one there. The driver's seat was empty. The steering wheel turned slowly on its own, correcting the truck's path by inches at a time. The pedals moved, depressing and releasing with a mechanical patience that made my stomach twist. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on the ice. The truck continued on, reached the dead end, and vanished behind the trees. I didn't follow it. I went back inside, locked the door, and pulled the curtains shut. My phone buzzed once, an email from the county. They said no plows had been dispatched to my area overnight. Staffing shortages, road closed until further notice. I spent the rest of the day listening. The plow came every 40 to 50 minutes, like clockwork. Each time it slowed at my house. Each time it lingered just a second longer. By nightfall, the road was no longer a road. The snowbanks had grown higher, closer, narrowing the space until it felt like the house sat at the bottom of a frozen trench. The windows on the lower floor were level with the packed snow outside. At 8:12 p.m., the plow stopped. It didn't slow. It stopped. The engine idled outside my house, a deep, uneven growl that seeped through the walls. The headlights flooded the living room with harsh white light, bleeding around the edges of the curtains. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening. The engine cut out. Silence followed, thick and absolute, like the storm had swallowed every sound in the world. Then came the scrape, not the blade, something else. Metal dragging across ice, slow, careful, footsteps. They crunched up the driveway, one deliberate step at a time, stopping right in front of the door. I waited for a knock. It didn't come. Instead, I heard breathing. Close, right on the other side of the door. Heavy and labored, like someone who had been working too long in the cold. A voice followed, low, strained. Road needs clearing. It sounded wrong, like the words were being remembered instead of spoken naturally, each syllable placed with effort. I didn't answer. The breathing continued for a long time. Then the footsteps retreated. The engine started again. The plow rolled away. It never came back. By morning, the storm was gone. The road was buried again. The snowbanks collapsed and uneven, like nothing had touched them at all. There were no tracks, no blade marks. The county finally plowed us out 2 days later with a bright new truck and a tired driver who complained about overtime and bad forecasts. I moved out that spring. Sometimes, during heavy snow, I still wake up at night to the sound of an engine passing too slowly. And every time, without thinking, I check the clock. It's always somewhere between 2 and 5 a.m. I didn't plan to take the last winter bus. No one ever does. My car broke down outside a small northern city after a freezing rainstorm turned the roads into glass. The mechanic told me the part wouldn't arrive until morning. I checked hotel prices, checked my bank balance, and made a decision I regretted almost immediately. There was one bus still running north, final departure of the night, a regional route that connected a handful of isolated towns before terminating near the border. It wasn't a city bus. It was the kind that served workers, night travelers, people who didn't have better options. The terminal was almost empty when I arrived. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A vending machine rattled in the corner. The digital departure board flickered like it might give up at any moment. Only one gate was active. The bus idled outside, exhaust fogging the air. I bought my ticket from a tired-looking clerk who barely glanced up. When I asked if the route was safe in this weather, she shrugged. "It's been running all winter," she said. "Driver knows the road." That should have reassured me. It didn't. I boarded at 11:58 p.m. There were 6 passengers already seated. They were spaced out, coats on, heads down. No one looked at me when I walked down the aisle. I took a seat halfway back on the right side, near the window. The driver didn't say a word. No greeting, no announcement, just a soft hiss as the doors closed and the bus pulled away. City lights faded quickly. Within 10 minutes, we were surrounded by forest. Snow fell lightly, just enough to blur the edges of the road. The heater worked, but unevenly. Cold pooled near the floor. At the first stop, the bus slowed. There was no shelter, no lights, just a sign half buried in snow. The doors opened. Cold rushed in. No one boarded. The driver waited a full minute, then closed the doors and continued. At the second stop, someone did board. A man. He wore no hat, no gloves. His coat was thin, unzipped despite the cold. Snow clung to his shoulders, unmelted. He didn't look at the driver. He didn't pay. He just walked down the aisle and sat 2 rows ahead of me on the opposite side. Something about him felt off immediately. Not threatening, not aggressive, just misplaced. Like he belonged outside instead of in the warmth. I watched him through the reflection in the window. His breath didn't fog the glass. The bus continued on. At the third stop, 2 more passengers boarded, a woman and a child. The child walked stiffly, like each step required conscious effort. The woman's hand rested on his shoulder, guiding him down the aisle. They sat near the front. Still, no one spoke. I told myself it was normal. Late-night routes were quiet. People kept to themselves. But then I noticed something. The bus wasn't stopping where it should have. I'd pulled up the route map earlier. There were supposed to be 7 stops before the final terminal. We passed at least 2 marked turnoffs without slowing. At the 4th stop, one that definitely didn't exist on the map, the bus stopped again. The doors opened. No sign, no road, just forest and snow. Someone boarded. This one took longer to climb the steps. I heard the sound before I saw them. Bare feet on metal, skin against cold. The passenger was tall, wrapped in something that might once have been a blanket. Their hair hung in long, damp strands. Snow didn't melt on them either. They walked past my seat. I held my breath. Their eyes flicked toward me briefly. Not focusing, not curious, just checking. They sat directly behind me. I could feel them there, not touching, not moving, just present. At this point, my instincts were screaming. I stood and walked to the front, keeping my movements slow. "Excuse me," I said to the driver. "Is this bus still going to?" He didn't look at me. His hands gripped the wheel tightly. His eyes stared straight ahead. "Yes," he said flatly. The tone ended the conversation. I returned to my seat. At the next stop, no one boarded. At the one after that, someone did. And then again, and again. Each time the passengers looked colder, thinner, less prepared for winter travel. Some limped, some moved too smoothly, like their joints bent the wrong way. None of them spoke. The bus grew crowded, but no one shifted. No one complained. The heater struggled. Frost crept along the edges of the windows. I noticed then that none of the original passengers had moved since boarding. The man ahead of me stared straight ahead. The woman near the front held the child, who hadn't blinked in a long time. I checked my phone. No signal. The time read 12:41 a.m. It stayed that way. The road outside looked wrong. Too straight, too empty. Snowbanks rose higher, pressing closer to the bus. Trees leaned inward like they were listening. At another unmarked stop, someone boarded who made my blood run cold. It looked like an elderly man. He wore my father's coat. Same color, same tear near the pocket. Impossible. My father had died years earlier. The man met my eyes as he passed. For a moment, his face shifted. Not into my father's, into something stretched thin, like a mask pulled too tight. He sat across the aisle from me. The bus doors closed. I stood up. "I need to get off," I said loudly. No one reacted. "I said I need to get off." The driver spoke without turning. "Final stop only. That's not what the ticket says. This route ends where it ends, he replied. The bus slowed. I felt a brief surge of hope, but it wasn't stopping for me. The doors opened again. Another passenger boarded. This one didn't walk. They were guided. Two others helped them up the steps, supporting something that barely moved on its own. The smell hit me then. Cold flesh, snow-covered rot. I backed toward the rear emergency exit. My hand closed around the handle. The bus jerked. The driver slammed the brakes. The interior lights flickered. Every head turned toward me at once. Every face. Some had eyes, some didn't. Some mouths opened, stretching too wide. The man behind me spoke, breath finally warm against my neck. You don't get off early. The driver turned then. His face was pale, hollow, familiar in the way nightmares feel familiar. You're still warm, he said. We don't leave warm ones behind. The bus lurched forward again. I pulled the handle. The alarm screamed. Cold exploded into the bus as the door flew open. I didn't hesitate. I jumped. The snow swallowed me. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. Pain flared through my legs, sharp and blinding. I rolled away just as the bus roared past. It didn't slow. It didn't stop. It didn't leave tracks. I lay there, gasping, watching red taillights vanish into the forest. The cold was immediate and brutal. I crawled toward the road, dragging my useless leg. Somehow I stayed conscious. A snowplow found me an hour later. They said the bus route I described had been discontinued years ago. No driver named on record, no terminal departure logged. The road I jumped from didn't exist on any map. Every winter since, people go missing along those highways. They find footprints sometimes, bare, leading nowhere. And when I hear about late-night buses in storms, I don't think about transportation. I think about warmth, and how badly some things want it. The call came in at 11:36 p.m., just as the storm started to get bad. I was dispatching for a small county sheriff's office, the kind that covered more trees than people. Winter nights were usually quiet. A couple of slide-offs, maybe a stranded motorist if someone ignored the weather warnings. Nothing dramatic. The screen flashed with an incoming 911 call, but the location field was blank. That happens sometimes when cell towers are overwhelmed, especially during storms. I answered without thinking much of it. 911, what's your emergency? For several seconds, there was nothing but static. Then a woman spoke. I can hear them outside. Her voice was calm, almost flat, not panicked, not whispering. Ma'am, can you tell me your location? I asked. I don't know the address, she said. We don't get mail. That immediately narrowed it down. Only a handful of homes in our jurisdiction were that remote. Are you inside your house right now? I asked. Yes. Who is them? I said. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her tone hadn't changed. They keep walking around it. I pulled up the map and started checking known residences along the forest roads. Snow had already knocked out a few power lines. I could hear wind howling faintly through her phone, even though she was indoors. How many people are with you? I asked. Just me and my husband. Are they trying to get inside? Another pause. They did earlier, she said. They stopped knocking. That made my stomach tighten. Did you see who it was? No. Did they say anything? Yes. What did they say? They asked if we were still warm. I muted my mic and signaled the on-duty deputy Mark, who was sitting a few desks away finishing paperwork. He leaned over as I explained quickly. He nodded and grabbed his jacket. I unmuted. Ma'am, I'm going to send a deputy to you. I need you to stay on the line with me. I don't think they're going to come back, she said. Why do you say that? Because they're already here. Before I could respond, the line disconnected. I called back immediately. No answer. Mark was already pulling out of the lot by the time I sent him the coordinates of the closest likely residence, a couple living off an unmaintained forest spur road. They were elderly, lived off-grid, and rarely contacted anyone. The storm worsened fast. Visibility dropped. Mark radioed that the road was barely passable, but he was continuing. At 12:04 a.m., the woman called again. This time, the location populated barely. It matched the address I'd suspected. 911, I said. I have help on the way. Are you safe right now? Yes, she said. Where is your husband? He's sitting with me. I heard no other breathing, no movement, just her voice and the wind. Are you in the same room? I asked. Yes. Can he speak? Another pause. No, she said. They told him not to. Cold crept up my spine. Who told him that? I asked carefully. They did, when they knocked. I asked her to describe the people outside. She said she couldn't. Every time she tried to look through the windows, she forgot what she was seeing as soon as she stepped away. That doesn't make sense, she added, almost apologetically. Mark radioed in then. He was about a mile out, moving slow. Ma'am, I said, do you have any weapons in the house? Yes. Can you access them? Yes. Are the doors locked? Yes. Are you hurt? No. She answered everything calmly, methodically, like she was reciting facts instead of responding to danger. Then she said, they're knocking again. I heard it through the phone, 3 soft thuds, wood on wood. Front door? I asked. Yes. Do not open it, I said firmly. They said it's colder now, she replied. Another knock, this one slightly louder. They said the storm is getting worse. I glanced at the weather feed. The storm had intensified, but nothing sudden, nothing dramatic. Ma'am, I said, do not open the door for anyone. Law enforcement is minutes away. They said you'd say that. My throat went dry. What exactly did they say? I asked. They said the voice on the phone would lie. The knocking stopped. Seconds passed. Then I heard footsteps, not approaching the door, moving around the house, crunching slowly through snow. They're walking again, she said. They always walk first. Walk where? I asked. Around us. I could hear it clearly now. The sound of compacting snow, steady and deliberate, moving from one side of the house to the other. How many sets of footsteps? I asked. She listened. 4, she said. Sometimes 5. You said earlier it was just you and your husband. Do you have children? No. Do you have neighbors nearby? No. Mark radioed again. He was turning onto the spur road now. Trees down, visibility near 0. Ma'am, I said, I need you to tell me what you can see inside the house. The lights are off, she said. They asked us to turn them off earlier. Why did you do that? They said it makes the house warmer. That's not true, I said. I know, she replied, but my husband said it felt warmer after. A chill ran through me. Can you turn the lights back on? I asked. No. Why not? They're standing where the switches are. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard breathing, not through the phone, from inside the call, close, too close. Ma'am, I said slowly, is someone else in the room with you? Yes, she said. They came in when the lights went out. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. Listen to me, I said. You need to get out of that room. Go anywhere else. Take your husband if you can. They said if we move, the cold will follow us. Another voice came through the line then. Not hers. Deeper, rougher, wrong. She's warm, it said. I shouted Mark's name into the radio, my voice breaking. The woman spoke again, quieter now. They're asking about you, she said. About me? I asked. They want to know if you're warm too. The call ended. Mark arrived at the house 6 minutes later. He found the front door unlocked. The house was cold. Colder than outside, he said later, like the heat had been drained out completely. There were footprints everywhere, bare, circling the structure in tight, overlapping loops. Inside, the furniture was pushed against the walls. All the lights were off. The breaker panel was open. The couple was found sitting together on the couch. They hadn't frozen. There were no signs of struggle. They looked peaceful. But the medical examiner said something that stuck with me. Their core temperatures were dangerously low, but not low enough to explain death. Like something had stopped them before the cold could finish the job. Search teams found more footprints leading into the forest behind the house. They went far, then stopped, as if whatever made them had simply stood still and waited. I still dispatch nights, and every winter when storms hit hard enough, we get calls from people who live too far out. They all say the same thing. Someone is walking around their house, asking if they're warm, and every time, before the call drops, they ask me one question. Can you hear them too? I took the night shift because it paid more. That's the honest reason. I didn't have some noble motivation or a fascination with solitude. The Winter Roads Department was short-staffed, and they needed someone willing to sit alone in a highway maintenance outpost from dusk until morning, monitoring weather sensors, answering the emergency line if it rang, and coordinating with plow crews when storms hit. Most nights, nothing happened. The outpost sat along a rarely used mountain highway that cut through national forest. No nearby towns, no houses, just road, trees, and snow. The building itself was a squat concrete structure with one garage bay, a small office, a break room, and a radio desk. The windows were narrow and reinforced, more like observation slits than anything meant for comfort. My first 2 weeks were uneventful, boring even. I brought books, podcasts, snacks. The radio crackled occasionally with routine updates. Wind rattled the building. Snow drifted. Then the storm came. It started late, dumping heavy snow fast. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the highway was officially closed by midnight. Plow crews were told to stay put until dawn. My job was simple: stay awake, monitor conditions, and report any emergencies. At 1:12 a.m., the radio clicked on by itself. Not the usual static burst, not a call tone, just a clean channel opening, like someone pressing the transmit button. I leaned forward, waiting. Nothing came through. I assumed it was interference and logged it. The weather does strange things to radio signals, especially in the mountains. At 1:47 a.m., it happened again. Same channel, same clean open. This time I picked up the handset. "Highway Outpost 7, I said. "Go ahead." Silence. I waited 10 seconds, then released the button. The channel closed. I remember feeling annoyed more than anything. False opens happen sometimes, especially during storms. I poured myself coffee and tried to refocus on the monitors. At 2:03 a.m., the emergency line rang. That got my attention immediately. That line was rarely used, and when it was, it usually meant someone had ignored the road closure. I answered. "Highway maintenance," I said. "What's your location?" Breathing answered me. Slow, controlled, too close to the receiver. I waited. Then a voice came through, distorted but calm. "I'm on the road." "What mile marker?" I asked. A pause. "Cold," the voice said. I felt irritation spike again. Prank calls happened occasionally, though it seemed unlikely out here. "Sir," I said, keeping my tone professional, "the highway is closed. If you're stranded, I need a location." Another pause. "I can see your lights." My stomach tightened. I glanced at the security monitors. The exterior cameras showed nothing but swirling snow and darkness. No headlights, no movement. "That's not possible," I said. "I'm close," the voice replied. "You left them on." I looked up at the ceiling lights above the desk. They were on. They always were. "Where are you?" I asked again, slower this time. The line went dead. I sat there longer than I should have, staring at the phone. Logic told me it was nothing. Someone confused, someone joking, maybe interference again. I logged the call and tried to forget it. At 2:39 a.m., the motion sensor outside the garage bay triggered. I snapped my head toward the monitor. The camera feed flickered, then stabilized. Snow drifted across the frame, illuminated by the floodlights. For a moment I saw nothing unusual. Then something moved. Not fast, not sudden. A figure stepped into the edge of the light. It was tall, taller than average, wrapped in something dark and heavy that blended with the night beyond the floodlights. It stood just outside the brightest circle of illumination, like it was careful not to come fully into view. I zoomed the camera in. The image degraded slightly, grainy from the snow, but I could see enough to feel uneasy. The figure wasn't wearing winter gear, no reflective strips, no bright fabric, no visible face covering, just a long, dark shape with shoulders too narrow for the height. It stood there, unmoving. I picked up the radio. "This is Outpost 7, I said. "Identify yourself." The radio crackled. Then the same breathing came through. "I told you," the voice said. "I'm on the road." "You need to step back into the light," I said, "for your safety." The figure didn't move. On the monitor, its head tilted slightly like it was listening. "I'm cold," the voice said again. "Let me in." I felt my heart start to pound. Training kicked in. We were instructed never to open the building for anyone during closures. Liability issues, safety concerns. If someone was stranded, we contacted emergency services and guided them remotely. "I'm calling this in," I said. "Stay where you are." The voice sighed. The sound came through the radio and the phone at the same time. I dropped the handset. On the monitor, the figure stepped forward, into the light. Its face wasn't right, not missing, not deformed, just wrong. The skin looked pale and stretched, like it didn't quite fit the structure underneath. The eyes reflected the floodlights strangely, catching too much light, glowing faintly. The mouth was slightly open, teeth visible, but not moving in sync with the breathing I heard. Its feet were bare. They stood directly on the ice-covered concrete, unmoving, unreactive to the cold. "I know you're alone," the voice said, now coming through the building's intercom speakers without me touching anything. They always leave one. I backed away from the desk. I can wait, it continued. The storm will last long enough. The exterior lights flickered. For a moment, the figure vanished as darkness swallowed the yard. When the lights came back on, it was closer to the door, close enough that I could see condensation forming on the reinforced glass. Not breath, just moisture spreading outward, like something cold pressing against warmth. I ran to the break room and locked myself inside. It was a flimsy door, but it was all I had. I killed the lights and stood there listening. Footsteps echoed through the garage bay, slow, heavy. They stopped outside the break room. The voice came again, softer now. You monitor the road, it said. I've been walking it all night. Something scraped against the door. Not a knock, not a handle, just pressure, testing. I just need to warm up, it whispered. I didn't answer. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time felt wrong in that room. Eventually, the pressure eased. The footsteps retreated. When I finally emerged, the building was silent. The radios were dead. The monitors showed only snow. By morning, the storm had passed. Relief crews arrived just after sunrise. They found me sitting at the desk, coat still on, eyes fixed on the cameras. They asked why the exterior lights had been manually overridden during the night. I told them I hadn't touched them. They checked the footage. At 2:39 a.m., a figure appeared on camera. At 2:41, it vanished. There was no record of it leaving. They also found footprints, bare, leading up to the garage bay, stopping right at the door. They reassigned me to a daytime position after that. But sometimes during heavy snow, my phone rings in the middle of the night. When I answer, I hear breathing, and a voice that says very calmly, "I'm still on the road." The first thing that should have scared me was how quiet the woods were. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind you get after fresh snowfall when everything feels muted and clean. This was different. It felt deliberate, like the forest was holding its breath. We didn't notice it right away. That was the mistake. There were 4 of us, me, my brother Daniel, and 2 friends from work, Aaron and Luke. We'd rented a remote cabin for 5 nights in January, deep enough into the state forest that cell service dropped 10 miles out. The listing bragged about isolation. No neighbors, no light pollution, just trees, snow, and silence. The first night was normal, cold but manageable. The cabin was old but solid, wood stove, thick log walls, a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. We cooked chili, drank too much, and listened to the wind scrape across the roof. Snow fell steadily, but not hard enough to worry us. We locked the door out of habit, more than fear. I woke up early the next morning to sunlight reflecting off snow so bright it hurt my eyes. Daniel was already up, staring out the window with a strange expression on his face. "Did you go outside last night?" he asked. "No," I said. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. He just pointed. I walked over and looked out the front window. Footprints. They circled the cabin, perfectly spaced. Deep impressions pressed cleanly into the fresh snow, forming a wide ring around the structure. Not close to the walls, not wandering, just circling. Like someone had paced around us for hours. Bare footprints. No boot tread, no pattern, just the shape of feet. I remember thinking someone was messing with us. Luke, maybe, pulling a prank. But the snow had fallen all night. There was no way footprints could be that clean unless they'd been made after the storm ended. And none of us had gone outside. Aaron laughed it off at first. Said maybe an animal made them. But animals don't walk in even circles, and they don't leave footprints shaped like human feet with toes and arches pressed into packed snow. Daniel tried the door. It opened easily. Cold air rushed in, sharp enough to sting my lungs. I stepped onto the porch and looked closer. The prints were large, bigger than mine. Bigger than Luke's, and he wore size 13 boots. They went around the cabin twice before stopping at the back wall, right where the forest thickened. No tracks led away. We followed the circle, careful not to step on the prints. They were deep enough that I could see ridges where skin had pressed against ice. Whoever, or whatever, made them hadn't been wearing anything on their feet. In that cold, exposed skin should have torn, bled, shown damage. These prints looked deliberate, like they were meant to be seen. We argued about leaving. Aaron wanted to pack up immediately. Luke said we were overreacting. that maybe someone from a nearby property had wandered through. Daniel didn't say much, but he kept looking at the tree line, especially where the prints stopped. In the end, we stayed. Another mistake. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. The snow didn't fall again. The wind picked up, rattling branches and hissing through the pines. By sunset, the footprints were still there, unchanged, as if the cold had preserved them. We didn't go outside after dark. That night I woke up to a sound that didn't belong, a soft crunch, slow, rhythmic, footsteps. I lay there listening, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was the wind knocking snow off branches. But the sound moved. It traveled along the wall of the cabin, stopping, then continuing. Crunch, pause, crunch. Someone was walking outside. I nudged Daniel, whispering his name. He was already awake. I could tell by the way he tensed. The footsteps circled the cabin once, then twice. Then they stopped. Right outside my window, I held my breath. I couldn't see anything through the frost-coated glass, but I felt it. Pressure, the unmistakable sense of being observed. The window creaked softly, not from impact, but from cold stress, and my mind filled the gap with something standing inches away. The steps moved again, heading toward the back of the cabin. We didn't sleep after that. Morning came with a dull gray sky. We opened the door together, all four of us, stepping onto the porch like we expected something to rush us. The footprints were back, fresh. Another ring around the cabin, overlapping the old ones. Same spacing, same size. But this time, there were handprints too. Pressed into the snow at several points, as if whatever made the tracks had leaned down, bracing itself against the ground. Long fingers, too long. The impressions dug deeper at the tips, like claws pressing down harder than the rest of the hand. Aaron swore quietly. Luke stopped laughing. We followed the tracks again. Same ending, same tree line, same absence of departure. Daniel crouched near one of the handprints, studying it too closely. He frowned. "There's no drag," he said. "No balance marks. Whoever did this wasn't slipping, not even a little." That night, the knocking started. Not loud, not aggressive. 3 soft taps against the cabin wall. Pause. 3 more. It came from different sides each time. Sometimes near the door. Sometimes near a window. Always measured. Always patient. We didn't respond. Around midnight, Luke snapped. He grabbed a flashlight and said he was going to scare whoever was messing with us. Before any of us could stop him, he unlocked the door and stepped onto the porch. The cold swallowed him instantly. We followed him outside, flashlights cutting weak tunnels through the darkness. The snow reflected just enough light to see the footprints clearly. They were everywhere now, overlapping, crossing, circling tighter than before. Luke stood near the edge of the porch, shining his light into the trees. "Not funny," he shouted. The forest didn't answer. Then something moved, not running, not charging, just shifting. A tall shape stood between 2 pines, barely visible against the darkness. It didn't reflect light the way snow or bark did. It absorbed it. Luke froze. The shape stepped forward. Its feet landed exactly in the existing prints. Same size, same spacing. It didn't come closer. It just stood there, watching. I couldn't make out a face, but I knew where its head was. I knew it was looking directly at us. Then Daniel whispered, "Inside, now." We didn't argue. We slammed the door and locked it. The knocking didn't return that night. In the morning, Luke was gone. His bed was untouched. His boots were still by the door. His jacket hung where he'd left it. Outside, the footprints told a story we didn't want to understand. One set left the circle. Bare feet. They headed into the forest, and beside them, dragged slightly at first, then lifted cleanly off the snow, were the marks of something being carried. We left that day. We didn't pack properly. We didn't clean. We didn't look back. Search and rescue came later. They said Luke must have wandered off confused, hypothermic. They said the prints were probably distorted by melting and refreezing. They never explained why the prints stopped after 100 yards, or why the last set turned and circled the cabin one final time before disappearing. I don't go into the woods in winter anymore, and when snow falls outside my house now, I keep the curtains closed, because sometimes in the morning I still find footprints circling my place. Bare, even, patient. I took the job because it was supposed to be temporary. The rail company needed someone to monitor a remote signal station during winter shutdown. Freight traffic had slowed, passenger lines were suspended, and most of the automated systems still required a human presence in case something failed. The pay was good, the hours were long, and the isolation didn't bother me. At least, I thought it wouldn't. The station sat beside an abandoned stretch of track that cut through open tundra and sparse tree lines. No nearby towns, no homes, just steel rails disappearing into snow and fog. The building itself was small and reinforced, with thick walls, a single entrance, and a raised platform that overlooked the track. I arrived just before a major cold front rolled in. The supervisor who dropped me off didn't linger. He handed me the keys, ran through the checklist, and left before the weather turned worse. "Signals sometimes activate on their own," he said casually. "Temperature fluctuations. Don't worry unless you see movement on the track." I laughed then. That didn't last long. The first night passed quietly. The heaters worked. The signals stayed dark. The wind sang through the open land, low and constant. On the second night, the signal lit up at 1:22 a.m. green. That wasn't possible. There were no scheduled trains on that line. None for weeks. I checked the system. No incoming traffic registered. No remote activation logged. I reset the signal. It went dark. 2 minutes later, it turned green again. I radioed Central Operations. No response. Static swallowed my calls, thick and unyielding. I stepped outside onto the platform, the cold biting instantly through my gloves. The green light cast a sickly glow across the snow, illuminating the tracks stretching endlessly into darkness. That's when I heard it. A sound far down the line. Not wind, metal, a faint rhythmic clatter, distant but unmistakable. A train. I stood there, heart pounding, scanning the horizon. Nothing appeared. The sound faded. The signal switched to red on its own. I went back inside, logged the incident, and told myself it was interference. Thermal expansion. Something explainable. At 2:47 a.m., the signal turned green again. This time, the sound came with it. Closer. Louder. I grabbed binoculars and scanned the track. A shape emerged from the fog. A train. Old. Far older than anything still in operation. Rusted cars. Faded markings. Windows dark and opaque. The locomotive's headlight was dim, flickering like a dying bulb. It moved too slowly. Freight trains were heavy, yes, but this one crawled, wheels grinding against frozen rails. No horn sounded, no radio call. I felt a growing sense of wrongness settle over me. The train passed the station without stopping. As it did, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were no crew visible in the cab. The windows reflected only snow and darkness. The cars rattled by, one after another, until the final one disappeared into the fog beyond the station. The signal flipped to red. The sound faded. Silence returned. I didn't sleep after that. I tried calling Central again once daylight came, but the lines were still dead. The storm had worsened overnight, cutting off all access. I was stuck until conditions improved. That night, the signal activated again. 1:22 a.m., exactly the same time. Green. The temperature inside the station dropped sharply, the heaters straining. Frost crept along the edges of the windows from the inside. The sound returned, closer this time. I didn't go outside. I watched through the window as the train emerged from the fog again, identical in every detail. Same rust, same dim headlight, same slow pace. As it passed, I saw movement inside one of the cars, a shape pressed against the window. Then another. Faces, pale, hollow-eyed, mouths slightly open, teeth visible behind frost-covered glass. They weren't looking out at the world. They were looking at the station, at me. The final car passed. The signal went red. The temperature slowly returned to normal. I sat there shaking, unable to process what I'd seen. The third night I tried to stop it. I disconnected the signal entirely, pulling breakers and cutting power manually. The board went dark, no lights, no automation. At 1:22 a.m., the green glow filled the room anyway. It shone through the window. The signal outside burned bright, powered by nothing. The sound came immediately. This time the train slowed as it approached the station. It screeched to a stop directly in front of me. The doors on the nearest car slid open. Cold poured out, carrying a smell like old metal and frozen breath. I heard footsteps inside the car. Slow, shuffling, waiting. A voice echoed from within. "Signal man." I backed away from the window. "You cleared the track," it continued. "Now you board." I ran to the far end of the station and locked myself in the storage room, heart hammering in my ears. The sound of metal scraping echoed as doors opened and closed outside. Footsteps climbed onto the platform. They stopped just beyond the wall. The voice came again, closer now. "You work nights," it said. "So do we." I don't remember when the storm ended. I remember waking up on the floor of the station, sunlight streaming through the windows, the signal dark and silent. Rescue crews arrived later that day. They said the storm had knocked out communication lines for nearly 48 hours. They found no evidence of a train, no tracks disturbed, no records, no logs. But when they reviewed my paperwork, one detail stood out. I had been signing the signal logs at 1:22 a.m. Every night, even the nights before I arrived. The handwriting matched mine perfectly. I quit that job immediately. The line was permanently shut down soon after. But freight operators still report something strange in winter. Signals activating on dead tracks, green lights burning through snow and fog, and the sound of a train that no longer exists. The town wasn't on my route. That's what bothered me most afterward. I'd driven that highway dozens of times in winter, hauling freight between distribution centers, and I knew every exit by memory. When the snow started coming down hard just after midnight, I slowed and stayed focused, expecting nothing more than another long, quiet night. Then I saw the lights. They appeared through the snowfall like a cluster of stars dropped too low, street lights, house windows, a faint glow spreading across the horizon. I checked my GPS, no town marker, no services listed. I told myself it was a small settlement I'd forgotten. That happens sometimes in rural stretches. I took the exit. The road down was plowed, not recently but carefully. Snowbanks rose evenly on both sides, shaped cleanly, not torn up by heavy equipment. It felt maintained in a way that didn't match the storm still falling around me. As I drove in, the radio cut to static. Then a voice came through, calm and distant. "Road conditions worsen ahead. Reduce speed." It wasn't a station I recognized. The town itself looked normal at first glance. One main street, a gas station, a diner with its lights on, a few houses set back behind bare trees. Snow fell softly here, settling instead of whipping sideways like it had on the highway. I pulled into the gas station, more out of curiosity than need. The pumps worked. That alone felt wrong. Power outages were common in storms like this. I filled up and went inside. The bell above the door rang. A man stood behind the counter, older, bundled in layers that looked decades out of date. He smiled when he saw me. "Storm caught you too?" he asked. "Looks like it," I said. "Did they close the highway?" He nodded. "They always do." "Always? In weather like this?" Something about his phrasing stuck with me, but I ignored it. I paid for the gas and asked about food. "The diner's open," he said. "You'll want to eat while it's warm." The diner was nearly empty. A couple sat in a booth near the window, hands wrapped around mugs. A man sat alone at the counter, staring into his coffee. The waitress greeted me without asking what I wanted and poured a cup in front of me. "Passing through?" she asked. "Was," I said. "Guess I'm stuck for the night." "That happens," she replied easily. I ate. The food tasted fine, normal. The warmth settled into my bones, easing the tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. That's when I noticed the clocks. There were 3 in the diner, one above the door, one behind the counter, one on the wall near the bathrooms. They all read 12:17 a.m. None of them moved. I checked my phone. 12:17. No signal. "How long has the road been closed?" I asked the waitress. She glanced at the clock, then back at me. "Since the snow started," she said. "Which was tonight." The couple in the booth stood and left. I didn't hear the door open or close. One moment they were there. The next, the booth was empty, mugs still steaming. I paid and went back outside. The snow had stopped, not slowed, stopped. The air was completely still, no wind, no sound. I walked down the street, feeling watched but unable to pinpoint why. Houses stood dark now, lights extinguished all at once, curtains drawn. I tried my truck. It wouldn't start. No click, no turnover, just dead silence. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, measured. I turned. People were standing in the street, not crowds, just individuals spaced evenly, facing me. Men, women, a few children, all dressed for winter but inadequately. Thin coats, no gloves, no hats. They weren't breathing hard, they weren't shivering, they just stood. A man stepped forward. "You should stay," he said. "The storm hasn't passed." "It's not snowing," I said. He smiled gently. "It doesn't have to." I backed toward my truck. "Where am I?" I asked. He hesitated, like he wasn't sure how to answer. "You missed the turn," he said finally. "For what?" "For leaving." My breath fogged. The air grew colder with every second. Frost crept across my windshield from the inside. "People stop here," the man continued, "when they can't go on." "I can go on," I said. "My truck just won't," he finished. "Not until it's time." The others took a step closer. I ran. I don't know where I went. Down side streets, between houses, past buildings that faded when I wasn't looking directly at them. The cold chased me, clawing through my clothes. I found the highway by accident. The exit ramp was buried under snow now, untouched like it had never been plowed. My truck sat at the top, engine running. I didn't question it, I drove. I didn't look back. When I finally reached a rest stop hours later, shaking and exhausted, I checked my phone. It read 12:18 a.m. 1 minute had passed. I asked a state trooper about the town. He frowned and asked where I'd exited. When I told him, he shook his head. "There's nothing there," he said. "That exit was closed years ago after a pileup. Too many people froze waiting for help." I still drive that highway, but when storms hit, I stay on my route no matter what I see, because sometimes in the distance I spot lights glowing where no town should be, waiting. I volunteered to check the cabins because everyone else said the road was too dangerous. The state park closed after a late January storm, dropped more snow than predicted, and knocked out power across most of the region. Rangers evacuated visitors, locked the gates, and posted warnings, but protocol required a final sweep once conditions stabilized. The supervisor asked for someone to verify that no one had ignored the closure and stayed behind. I said yes because I knew the area better than anyone else on the team. I had worked that park for 7 years. I knew every trail, every overlook, every seasonal cabin tucked into the woods. I had done winter patrols before. Snow didn't scare me. I took a snowmobile and enough supplies for 2 nights, planning to check the outer loop cabins and return by morning. The first 3 cabins were empty, doors locked, power out. Snow drifted high against the walls. No footprints except animal tracks and wind-sculpted patterns that changed shape when you looked at them too long. The 4th cabin was different. Its door was unlocked. That alone didn't mean much. Visitors sometimes left in a hurry when storms hit, but protocol required inspection. I parked the snowmobile and approached on foot. The porch was swept clean. Not shoveled, clean, like snow had never touched it. I noticed the smell first when I opened the door. Cold air, yes, but also something faintly metallic, like wet pennies. Inside, the cabin was dark. No generator hum, no heater. The temperature inside felt lower than outside, which shouldn't have been possible. "Park service," I called. "If anyone's inside, make yourself known." No response. I stepped in and shut the door behind me to keep the wind out. My boots left fresh tracks on the wooden floor, crunching softly over frost. The furniture was pushed back against the walls. Not overturned, not damaged, just cleared. In the center of the room, the fire pit was cold, but the ash looked disturbed, as if someone had stirred it long after the fire went out. I checked the bedroom, empty. The bathroom, empty. The back door, unlocked. Outside, behind the cabin, the snow was smooth and untouched, except for one thing: bare footprints. They led from the tree line to the back door. No boot prints, no snowmobile tracks, just bare feet pressed deep into hard snow. I crouched and examined them. They were too deep for their size, as if whatever made them carried more weight than it should have. The toes were long, the heel impressions sharp, they led inside, and there were no prints leading away. I radioed my supervisor and reported a possible unauthorized presence. The signal was weak, but I got enough through to say I was continuing checks with caution. I didn't stay in that cabin long. The 5th and 6th cabins were normal, locked, snowed in, silent. The 7th cabin had smoke stains above the chimney, fresh ones. That shouldn't have been possible. No one was authorized to use the cabins after closure. I parked farther back this time. The snow around the cabin was disturbed, not with tracks, but with wide, shallow depressions, like something heavy had knelt repeatedly near the walls. I didn't call out. I opened the door slowly. The inside was warm, not heated, not comfortable, just not cold. My breath didn't fog. That terrified me more than anything else so far. Someone was sitting at the table. A man. His back was to me. He wore a jacket far too thin for winter, the fabric darkened with moisture. His shoulders were hunched slightly, as if he were conserving heat. I raised my radio. "Sir," I said calmly, "the park is closed. I need you to stand up and face me." He didn't move. "I can get you help," I said, "but you need to turn around." He spoke without turning. I tried to leave. The voice was rough, cracked, like it hadn't been used in a while. "The road's closed," I said. "We can coordinate." I followed the trail, he continued. Then the snow followed me. My instincts screamed to back away, but training kept me rooted. "Sir," I said, "are you injured?" He laughed quietly. "I don't feel much of anything now." He stood, slowly. When he turned, I saw his face. His skin was pale and stretched tight. His lips were bluish, cracked. Ice rimed the edges of his eyelashes, but his eyes were open and alert, too alert. "You're cold," I said. "I was," he replied. Then I stopped being. He stepped toward me. The warmth in the room vanished instantly. Cold slammed into my lungs, sharp enough to steal my breath. Frost spread across the walls in thin, branching lines. I backed out of the cabin and slammed the door. I didn't lock it. I ran to the snowmobile and started it with shaking hands. As I pulled away, I looked back. The man stood in the doorway, bare feet on frozen wood, watching. I didn't stop until I reached the ranger station. They sent a full team the next morning. They found the 7th cabin empty. No fire, no power, no signs of recent occupation. But they did find footprints, bare, leading from the cabin into the woods. They followed them for nearly a mile before they stopped abruptly in the middle of an open clearing. No collapse marks, no disturbance, just prints ending mid-step. The incident was classified as exposure-related hallucination brought on by stress and cold. They offered counseling. I transferred parks that spring. I don't patrol winter trails anymore. And every January, when temperatures drop fast enough, the park logs record something strange. Cabins found unlocked, floors swept clean, fire pits disturbed. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, visitors say they hear knocking from inside empty buildings. 3 slow knocks, like someone asking to be let back in. I was hired to watch the lodge because no one else wanted to. The ski season had ended early that year. A bad winter, not enough snow in December, too much all at once in January. The resort shut down after a late-season storm damaged a lift and buried the access road. Most of the staff left within 2 days. The owners needed someone to stay behind, keep the pipes from freezing, check the generators, and report any structural issues once the storm passed. They offered me good money. I told myself it was just a few nights alone in a big building. I'd worked security before. This was easier. No people, no crowds, just snow and silence. The lodge sat halfway up the mountain, surrounded by dense forest. Once the road closed, there was no way in or out until crews cleared it. They warned me about that. I signed the waiver anyway. The first night was uneventful. Wind howled outside. Snow piled against the lower windows. The building creaked and shifted as temperatures dropped. I walked the halls every hour, checking doors, checking gauges, making notes. The place felt empty, in the way all large buildings do when they're shut down. Echoes where there shouldn't be any. Sounds that didn't quite belong to their source. Still, nothing alarming. The second night, I noticed the footprints. They were inside. I found them in the main lobby just after midnight, tracking across the tile floor from the front entrance toward the stairwell. Wet footprints, bare feet, slightly smeared as if whoever made them hadn't fully lifted their soles with each step. They stopped at the base of the stairs. I stood there for a long time, staring. The front doors were locked from the inside. The security log showed no access events. The cameras hadn't recorded any motion near the entrance. I told myself I must have missed something. Maybe a contractor had come through earlier, left snow inside, and it hadn't dried yet. It wasn't a good explanation, but it was better than the alternative. I wiped the prints away with a towel and finished my rounds. At 2:13 a.m., the fire alarm panel chirped softly. Not a full alarm, just a system alert. Zone 3, second floor west wing. I grabbed my radio and headed up the stairs. Zone 3 housed guest rooms that hadn't been occupied in months. I walked the hallway, checking each door. Everything was quiet, cold, but within acceptable range. No smoke, no heat spike. As I turned back, I heard movement behind me. Bare feet on carpet, slow. I spun around, flashlight raised. The hallway was empty, but the carpet near the wall was darker in patches. damp where snow had melted into the fibers. Footprints. They led toward the emergency exit at the far end of the wing. I didn't follow them. I radioed in the alert as a false trigger and returned to the office, locking the door behind me. I watched the camera feeds until morning without incident. Daylight made everything seem manageable, less threatening. I convinced myself I was overtired. The storm had rattled me more than I realized. The third night, the temperature dropped sharply. The generator kicked on twice. The building groaned under the weight of new snow. I kept busy checking valves and heaters, trying not to think too much. At 1:37 a.m., the radio crackled. Not a call, just static. Then breathing. I stared at the handset, unsure if I was imagining it. "Hello?" I said. The breathing stopped. A moment later, a voice came through. "I can't feel my feet." It wasn't distorted, it wasn't mechanical. It sounded like someone standing very close to the radio. "Who is this?" I asked. No answer. The radio clicked off. I unplugged it. The camera feed in the lobby flickered. For a second, I saw something standing near the staircase. Tall, pale, unmoving. Then the feed stabilized, showing an empty room. I told myself the cameras were glitching. Cold-affected electronics. I wrote it down and tried to focus on the paperwork. At 2:48 a.m., someone knocked. 3 slow knocks on the front doors. I froze. No one should have been able to reach the lodge. The access road was buried. Visibility was near zero. Even snowmobiles wouldn't make it up that incline in those conditions. The knocking came again. Same rhythm. I approached the doors cautiously, stopping several feet back. The glass was fogged from the temperature difference, making it hard to see outside. "Can I help you?" I called. "I need to warm up," a voice replied. It was faint, carried by the wind, but clear enough to understand. "I can call for help," I said. "Emergency services." "They won't come up here," the voice said. "They never do." Something about the certainty in that sentence made my stomach tighten. I didn't open the door. The knocking stopped. I waited. After a minute, I heard footsteps. Not retreating, moving sideways, circling the building. I backed away from the entrance and watched the camera feeds. One by one, motion alerts triggered as something passed beneath each exterior camera. It never came fully into view, just glimpses of limbs, a shoulder, a pale hand brushing the wall. Then the alert stopped. At 4:10 a.m., the power flickered, the lights dimmed, the generator hummed louder. In the sudden quiet, I heard something else. Movement inside the lodge, above me. Slow footsteps crossing the floor of the second level. I grabbed my flashlight and stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening. The steps stopped directly overhead. Then something began to drip. Water hit the tile near my feet, once, twice. I shined the light upward. A dark shape clung to the ceiling above the stairwell, limbs pressed flat, body unnaturally still. Water dripped from it steadily, pooling beneath me. Its head turned. Too far. Eyes opened. I ran. I didn't check doors. I didn't grab supplies. I fled into the maintenance room and barricaded myself inside until dawn. When crews arrived 2 days later, they found me sitting against the wall, shaking, unable to explain why every interior door on the second floor stood open. They said the cameras recorded nothing unusual. But one of the workers pulled me aside before leaving. He asked if I'd seen the footprints. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "people don't make it down the mountain before the cold takes them." "What happens to them?" I asked. He hesitated. "Some of them," he said, "try to come back inside." I quit that job immediately. The lodge reopened the following winter. Guests reported wet footprints in the hallways. The owners blamed melted snow. They always do.